Hello, Year 11s. I'm Mr. Weersing, and I have the good fortune to be the head of department for economics here at County High. This presentation will give you a good overview of why students study the subject, our track record of success, detail about our exam board and the course curriculum, before concluding with why it's a better time than ever to study the subject. So let's dig into some details about the subject. Our exam board is EDUCAUSE, and we really appreciate that relationship, because they teach us and encourage us to not just teach students to memorize correct answers, but to develop their own thinking. The way that shows up is in our mark schemes. They'll give us recommended answers in the essays, but they'll also be careful to point out that other valid responses grounded by solid economic theory are acceptable. So if you develop your thinking, you can get credit instead of just memorizing answers. We think that's a skill that will suit you well now and later in life. If you want to study economics at County High, you'll need to have done well in your GCSEs, so study hard. You'll need at least a 6 and a 5 in English. But for those students who have the right background and the right aptitude, our track record of success is phenomenal. As you can see on the slide, for the last 4 years, we've had a full 23% achieve the highest possible mark of A-star versus a national average of between 6 to 8%. And 91% of students last year achieved at least a B, with 100% achieving a C or better. We're very proud of that success and plan to continue it in the future. Let's move on next to what current students in year 12 and 13 think of the subject. I would really encourage you to pause the presentation here and just have a look through these comments. It's a selection of 3 year 12s and 3 year 13s, which summarize why they have chosen to study the subject, maybe what surprised them versus what they expected, and what encouraged them to continue with the subject and in some cases study it in university. While you may find my perspective interesting, I think those of your fellow students might be the most influential. Before we move on to why economics is such a good subject to study, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what the A-level specification for economics includes. Component 1, which is 30% of the qualification, is a written exam on economic principles, including multiple choice questions and structured questions. Component 2 is 2.5 hours, and it explores economic behavior. And in this portion of the exam, you'll be doing data response questions. And finally, in component 3, which is also 2.5 hours, you'll be evaluating economic models and policies. That's 40% of the qualification, and it covers microeconomics, macroeconomics, and trade and development. In this section, you might be asked to comment on, for example, the chart you see on the right, which was the Tory government's response to the COVID crisis, the different fiscal stimulus measures they used to support the economy, and also looked at the long-term debt obligations of taking those approaches. At the end of this course, you'll be able to comment intelligently on those policy responses about things that worked well and maybe areas where they could have done better.
So one of the things I'd like to share with you as part of the induction period is why should you study economics? Why is it a good subject for you to take? Number one is whether you study economics in university, whether you go on to become an economist, it's a really good subject for you to take. And there's a few reasons to support that. Number one, it supports your brain in learning to think in abstract terms. There's a lot of variables you'll need to keep in your head when you try to think about things like what impact a tax cut might have on the overall UK economy. Keeping all of those different variables in abstract terms straight in your head really trains your brain to not just have an unfounded opinion, but to support your opinions with facts and data. That's a skill that's going to be valuable no matter what you do in life, both personally and professionally, is to learn to think through your points of view and defend it with facts and data, and be prepared to change your mind when new data presents itself which challenges your underlying assumptions. It's a really good way to train your brain. Second, the facts are, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail later, but if you study at university, the odds are you'll learn a lot more than other graduates. It's a highly sought after field, not because everybody wants to just hire economists, which a number of companies do, but also because of that first reason. It trains your brain to think analytically and to be able to solve complex problems and be open to new data to challenge yourself. Something you should be aware of is it links especially well with maths. You should be taking some type of maths, even if it's just core maths, as in conjunction with economics, because they really pair well together. And if you go and study economics in university, becomes much more maths intensive at that point. It also pairs very well with humanities subjects when we do subjects like developmental economics. Essay writing will be an important part of the skill. Some of you may be thinking of careers in medicine or in engineering, and this may be one of your last subjects where you get chances to learn to develop your writing to support your opinions with facts in a well-structured argument. Again, that will be a skill that will be important for you no matter what you do in life. Economics is a social science. It's probably, at least at the A level, more social than the science side. And the reason that we say that is because you can't recreate a laboratory environment for economics. You can't control every variable like you would in a chemistry experiment or in a biology experience. There are many variables that you won't be able to control, so you have to make certain assumptions. However, you are able to find data and trends, particularly over a period of time, that will really help you narrow down what the likely outcomes are, and then be able to defend those likely outcomes with what are your assumptions, which if these things are true, then your conclusion will be correct. So that's a little bit about what economics is. Now, what did I say about in economics? That you shouldn't just state an opinion. You should always look for data to support your opinion. So just because I say economics graduates will make more than most other graduates, you shouldn't just take that as fact. You should expect and you should demand me to back that up in data. So here you have it. This is from a survey that looks at graduates from the 2009-2010 cohort, looking at them 5 years after graduation. What were the highest earners 5 years after graduates for different college or university programs? And as you see, economics for Cambridge comes out very high at £65,500 per year, as well as economics for UCL. Again, why is that? It's not that everyone's working as an economist, but it's that the skills that you will learn in this subject of being able to solve abstract problems, being able to support your opinions with facts and data, and have well-reasoned arguments are skills that are going to be very valuable for you no matter what your profession ends up being. So not only is economics a great subject to study normally, now in particular is a fantastic time to study the subject. You're seeing real issues like what's happening with Brexit right now. A lot of people think that decision's been made. We've already left the EU, everything's finished. However, what hasn't been worked out is what the trade agreement, if there is going to be a trade agreement, will look like at the end of 2020 when the current deal expires. 49% of all trade for the UK happens with the EU. That's the purple bit down here in this graph. Will there be a deal in place? What will be the impact on the economy if there's no deal? How will we replace that? What will be the macroeconomic impact as well as a microeconomic impact within particular industries? It's a really interesting time to see the impact of real-world decisions. And not just that, but earlier this year, and what's still ongoing with the coronavirus, the gentleman you see pictured, Rishi Sunak, is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He used economics to come up with a scheme to help preserve jobs. The furlough scheme you may have heard quite a bit about, which you see there in the slide, where the government's paying up to 80% of workers' salaries at a maximum of $2,500 per month, was designed with an economics in mind. How do we best protect jobs in the future? As a result of that, we're seeing much lower unemployment rates in the UK than countries that lack a similar policy like the US. So that's a chance for you to see the real world positive impact sound economic policy can have in the real world and sees the power of putting this in place. Now, was that the best policy? We'll continue to see over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, just as you're studying this subject. So for those reasons alone, it's a really interesting and fascinating time to see economics in action and to look at the real world impact.